Hi everyone, my name is Jim LaRocco. I'm from the curriculum department here at AbleNet. And today, as Deb said, we're going to be looking at distance learning with the equals math curriculum. So if you're familiar with equals math, hopefully you'll find that some of the supports that we have in place that I'm going to show you today are going to be really helpful. And of course, you can always contact the curriculum team at curriculum@ablenetinc.com to request any materials that I mentioned today. I will have that email address up at the end of the webinar, so if you did miss it, it will be there. But again, it's curriculum@ablenetinc.com. So we can go ahead and get started. And as Deb said, we have, we will be taking questions through the chat box, the chat window. So if you have questions, feel free to just go ahead and throw those out there, and Deb will get you an answer. And if otherwise, they'll be passed on to me. We do have a couple of poll questions, though, just to kind of get an idea of who's in the group here today with us. So I'm going to go ahead and launch that first poll question. And this is just a little bit about what your role is, whether you're a teacher, OT, PT, parent, paraprofessional, or some other kind of some other role in the school or even at home. All right, I'll give the poll about 5 more seconds. Looks like almost everyone has responded. I'm seeing about 50% of you are special education teachers, and then it's a pretty good mix throughout from there, almost 20% administrators. All right, so it's good to see, especially with administrators. With the equals curriculum, administrators really play an important role in making sure that the curriculum is has a good, what's the word I'm looking for? I want to say cheerleader, but that's not necessarily it. Someone who's really backing the program and making sure the teachers are supported so that the program can be successful. All right, sorry, I forgot to end the poll there. So yeah, so about 50% teachers, and then there's a mix of paraprofessionals, AT specialists, administrators, quite a bit. All right. So the second question that we're going to throw out is just a little bit about who has equals within this webinar. So does your school or program have the equals curriculum? You don't have to be a user necessarily, but do you have access to it is just kind of what we'd like to know. As I mentioned, the distance learning materials that you'll see today are for the equals program. But maybe you're just wanting to learn a little bit more about equals and the different supports available as well. So again, I'll give that poll about 10 more seconds, and then we can move on to our third poll before we jump into the webinar. It's just, as I said, nice to know kind of who's here and what everyone's familiarity with everything is. All right, so 62% of you have equals in your classroom or in your school, and about 38% of you do not. So for those of you who are not familiar with the equals curriculum, welcome. And for those of you who are equals users, I hope you know about all the resources that we've mentioned already. Or I'm sorry, not that we've mentioned already, that we'll cover today. And if not, of course, you can reach out to us. All right, and then the last question is just about internet access in the home for your students. So you may not know what internet access looks like for your students, but in general, what would you say is a good guess as to how many students in your programs have access to the internet, reliable access, have devices, and so on? And really, we're looking for devices in any form. So even if it's just a phone with an internet connection, that could count as well. Obviously, that is going to vary depending on the needs of the student. All right, just a couple more seconds for that poll. I'll go ahead and close it out. Okay, and so we're seeing about 30% of you have students, or I'm sorry, 30% of the participants today, the students in the program have 90 to 100% internet connection. And then the numbers drop off quite a bit from there. 81 to 90% is 18%. So most of us have students with internet connection, which is really good because not having that internet internet connection, as I'm sure you already know, really makes distance learning a lot more difficult. So let's go ahead and jump right in. While there is no substitute for traditional classroom instruction, Equals provides support so students can continue to deliver quality math instruction in that distance format. So after talking with teachers and administrators, we identified key features that are important for distance learning. We really want to meet the diverse needs of teachers, students, and parents, and this is our #1 priority. In addition to identifying the learning needs of the students, this also means identifying the resources at home and available to teachers. So we do also have to keep in mind that not only are we concerned about do the students have internet access, but when we talk about the Equals curriculum, Equals is that multisensory math program with those hands-on opportunities for students. What tools do students have at home that they can use for this hands-on learning? Now, obviously, they're not going to have the traditional Equals manipulatives. We might find some other things in the cabinets, though. Cereal, crackers, maybe toys throughout the house we can use as manipulatives, whatever it may be. In this situation, we're just using anything that we can really to make sure that the math makes sense to students. One thing that we're going to rely on heavily with distance learning is the Equals Technology Lesson Center. It's a very useful tool for distance learning as it provides a web-based tool for teachers to demonstrate lessons and concepts with a large image library, as well as a majority of the work mats, vocabulary and action cards, posters, and just about everything else that comes printed in the Equals kit. In addition, parents and students have easy access to that Equals Technology Lesson Center, since the Equals Tech Center is available from our home page with no login credentials required. It's very easy for students and parents to get access to that resource. We know that the partnership between home and school has always been really important, but in this distance format, that importance is really heightened. We want parents to be as involved as possible with their students. If at all possible, they could be sitting there with their child as they're viewing these remote lessons, whether it's through the Equals Technology Lesson Center or a live video of the teacher, whatever that may look like from classroom to classroom. So there are multiple training options through our Fidelity Success program, and this is included with Equals. So if you have the current version of Equals and you feel like you need some support for your program or maybe just for yourself, you can reach out to us because we do have that Fidelity Success training program. We do have additional training available for distance learning, technology, and meeting specific student needs, including motor and language support as well. So beyond just your standard assessment and lesson component trainings, we do have additional trainings if you're looking for something very specific. Parents also have some training opportunities. There's the Equals Technology Lesson Center. We have a video called the Parent Guide, and it provides a very basic overview of the Equals Tech Center. So we're not going to get into some more of the technical pieces of the Tech Center, but just a general overview of where to find materials and how parents can pull those things up for their students. In addition to that, we have a parent training series that we're currently developing. It focuses on cause and effect and solving everyday problems. This particular video, the part 1, cause and effect solving everyday problems, is available currently on our YouTube page. Here's a quick look at what that video looks like.
Let's move on to a more challenging activity by showing choices before solving a problem. In math, thinking about choices and what might happen supports students as they tackle problems and make decisions about what to do, what tools to use, and what the outcome might look like for each of those. For example, the countertop is too messy to cook. Here's an example of an everyday problem you can solve with your child by giving choices about the action and tool to use to solve this problem. I want to make dinner. I don't have enough room on the counter to cut vegetables. This counter has too many things on it. What can I do? I can cover the counter with a blanket, or I can put the utensils back into a container. Ask your child, what should I do? Cover the counter with a blanket, or put away the utensils? Let me think. When I cover the counter, it doesn't look like I could cut vegetables on the counter. The blanket just covers up the utensils. But when I clean up the utensils, it looks like there's plenty of room to cut the vegetables.
So
Ask, what do you think? Cover the counter with a blanket, or put away the utensils? This looks like it's too hard to cut. I would not use a blanket. Now the counter is cleared. I have enough room to cut vegetables. This solves the problem better than covering it with a blanket.
All right, so really what we're trying to show here is that problem solving and the problem solving process can be followed at home even when you're not talking about math or school related problems. We really want to highlight how parents can use those problem solving strategies that students are working on or students are working on in the classroom at home in a very functional way to think critically about everyday problems. So the first response to emergency school closing or distance learning is the equal school closing plan. This was our first initial reaction to school closing. So should the schools close down in the future for any reason, we do have these materials ready to go. So you can quickly send things home as you're trying to determine what distance learning is going to look like. Many of us at this point are past this point, but know that in the future, if schools shut down for any reason, you can contact us to get these emergency school closing plans. It's a reorganization of some of the materials, really highlighting some of the really effective home to school material supports. Things like the home letters are very prominent within this choice. Once the initial equals school closing plan is in place, teachers can then determine which resources are available at home and with the teacher or at school if they have not previously been determined. So moving forward, I think some schools will be out there looking at what resources do students have at home in case we ever have to shut down. It might be a consideration. If not, again, we have some of those materials in place and ready to go for teachers. We want to know about things that are that all students have at their home. Is there a computer? Is there internet access? Is there a printer available? A smartphone? What kind of math tools are available? Assistive technology, or any other kind of language device or language access. It's also important to think about what teachers have. Many teachers were caught off guard when suddenly they were told they weren't coming back to school. We want to make sure that we know what materials teachers have available as well, especially if they're going to be expected to be demonstrating concepts via a webcam. The available resources for both teachers and students will largely determine how students can be supported. We will work with you to get you the most effective materials that you would possibly need if you just reach out to us. Again, like I said, curriculum@ablenetinc.com, we can work with you to really find a solution that works for your school. So getting into the actual supports in place beyond that school closing plan, we have created 3 options for distance learning. There's the equals quick access, and this teaches full lessons with home activities. So this would be very similar to what you're already doing in the classroom. You're going through the lesson, and it's just some supports to make some of those distance activities a little bit easier. The second one there is the equals extension e-learning lessons. So these are extension lessons for one or a few lessons at a time. So you might teach one lesson from the curriculum, and then you might use one of these extension lessons to just kind of review and maintain some of those skills and get some extra practice in. And then finally, we have the equals focus on review and skill maintenance, and for this, technology is not required. So for those students out there who do not have internet, or maybe they don't have a computer or any kind of technology at home, the focus on review and skill maintenance is going to be some materials you could send home in a printed format. So we would send you those files, you can print them out and then distribute them accordingly. And that way students can still, at the very least, work on review and maintenance. This is also a popular option that's popping up in ESY, I've noticed recently. So with many schools still doing ESY, some in a distance format, some of those schools are using those review and skill maintenance packets with their students. Remember that all of these options could be tweaked to make room for more unseen variables or specific student needs, so you can always modify these if needed. So looking a little bit closer at each now, we have the equals quick access, and this is going to provide the closest alternative to typical equals instruction. Like I said, it's going to be very similar to what you see in the classroom. Teachers will continue to teach equals virtually using web conferencing software such as Zoom, as we're doing now, along with the Equals Technology Lesson Center, which provides consistency of materials, which is great for our students. And it also offers some live demonstrations or even pre-recorded lesson videos. So you might have students that can't view or join a web meeting at a particular time. Maybe there are multiple students in the classroom using one device. You could always do pre-recorded and then just provide those to students later. Some schools are also choosing to do pre-recorded videos for students and sending them home on something like a USB drive for students. So that's another option. Included in this equals quick access, which might be one of the best pieces here to really support parents, is the parent materials list of manipulatives that can be found in a home setting. This is going to give parents an idea of what kind of materials they can find at home. As I mentioned earlier, maybe it's some toy cars, Lego bricks, or even something like cereal or crackers to use as manipulatives within the lessons. Also included in this quick access are the home letters with activities, practice activities that are from the lesson, as well as some action dictionary adaptations for language and motor. And of course, these are provided as needed to support students and parents. So we provide you with the packet, and then you would choose what you feel is going to be most appropriate for each student. Obviously, there are some students that won't need those adaptations that you find in the action dictionary, while other students really will need those kinds of supports. So we do leave that up to you to determine what would be best for each. The teacher could then be using something like web conferencing software and share their screen and demonstrate concepts virtually as seen here on the Equals Technology Lesson Center, while the parent sits next to the student and assists them with concrete materials to follow along. So here we're using WorkMat 14, and we're looking at division, and we're just showing how we can demonstrate the concept of division to students using that Equals Technology Lesson Center. And then the parents can work through that with those actual materials at home. So this way, the students are still getting some of that direct instruction from the teacher. And what's nice is we're also providing some support to the parent here, because now they're seeing what the expectation is, and they can mirror that in those hands-on opportunities at home. Next, we have that Equals Extension e-learning lessons. Again, this is just that closer look. And this is a collection of lesson activities that are meant to be taught after an Equals lesson or a set of lessons have been taught to be able to focus directly on that concept. So these are additional activities that will relate to the objectives that we've taught in either a previous lesson or a set of previous lessons. It's just going to kind of depend which extension lesson we're looking at to determine which lessons it's going to cover. An example of the lesson extensions here are on the right, on the left, and the options of the hands-on materials list for parents is on the right. The items on this list were chosen by topic, and we really considered the likelihood of what would typically be found in a home. So you should find on this list at the very least 1 or 2 objects that most parents will have in their home that they can use with their child. And of course, we did consider safety as well. In this extension lesson, students are continuing to learn about and practice joining and separating sets taught after the teacher has taught lesson 3A1. So we see on the screen here, it says after 3A1. So that lesson the expectation is that you would teach that. And then this extension activity, as well as the home task at the bottom of that page, would be an opportunity for the parents and the student to work together at home. This skill supports number sense and precedes learning addition and subtraction. And parents can use those materials found on that at-home list along with the student to work on these activities. Here's a materials options list for parents for one lesson. So this is a much closer look at that list. Parents can provide a set of 5 objects for students to compose and decompose amounts to 5 with the teacher, and again later when working on the home task. The options list shows parents can choose which set of objects they want to use based on student interest, size for safety, and ease of use and availability. So this list is not something that you would need all of. You would just need a set for the student to work on. So maybe you only have books, you only have nesting bowls, you only have crackers, and then notice that last one down at the very bottom is other. So should a parent not have any of those things on the list, they could still look around their home and look for something that would be appropriate for their child to use. When necessary, slideshow templates have been created to demonstrate math concepts. For example, these slides show the relationship between line segments and shapes. Teachers can then create their own with as many examples as they would like. So still using that idea that we're going to be using that web conferencing software, we've got some just simple templates for some of the objectives within the curriculum. When you get those extension lessons, again, by request, you'll get some of these templates as well that you can use in your class, or I guess not in your classroom, during your class time on your web conference. Again, they're just templates, so teachers can modify them as needed, change them up to suit every specific student's needs. Again, it just gives you an additional way that you can provide some of these objectives or some of these concepts to students. So on this slide template, students can see how equal parts form a whole shape. And as noted, teachers can modify the templates to meet the needs of their students. On this slide and the next one, students will decide which side of the scale has more and which side of the scale has less of an amount, and then the answer is revealed. And we really took the time to make some of these because it's just, we know that teachers don't carry their balance scale to and from school. So if you happen to be in a position where you don't have any of those equals materials, we did take that into consideration by providing these templates to kind of still support some of the concepts in a way that's going to make sense. On this slide, students will decide if one side has more and one side has less, or if the amounts are equal. And again, that would be identified through some type of feedback, whether that be a communication device, a verbal response, or some other kind of response. The third choice of distance learning solutions is for teachers to guide parents in reviewing and maintaining skills at home when there is no internet access. So again, this is what I would consider the last resort. So this is for those parents that just don't have that access to technology. We still want to make sure students are working on concepts, doing something academic. So this is going to provide some packets that you can send home for the parents to work with their child on concepts that they've already seen in the classroom. The teacher and parent packets are sent with materials from the current lesson, as well as the previous 4 lessons that the student has covered in class. And this will provide the student an opportunity to continue to review skills and show their parents what they've been learning in the classroom. Printing and delivery of physical materials is at the discretion of the school district, program, or individual teacher. So we do not print and send these for you, but we will absolutely send you those digital files, and then you can get those to your students in whatever way is appropriate. I know we've had some districts tell us that the local fire department delivered them, the police have delivered them, some teachers have hand delivered them to their students' homes. You know, how you get those materials to the students is a district discussion for sure, but something to consider. Typically, when you're using these materials, the lessons have been taught and it is late in the year, or the student is at home for a shorter period of time, making it an opportune time for review. So I think back to when I was in the classroom and I would have students that might be out for 2 weeks, maybe a month because of some medical issues. Sometimes this is the kind of support that's going to work best. It's going to take some of that pressure off of the parents, and we're really by providing that work for the students. The materials consist of a basic parent packet, and that includes the skill worksheets, page 4 of a previously taught lesson, which if you're familiar with the equals curriculum, page 4 is all about practice and application. So again, it's giving those parents and students, or parents and their child, an opportunity to work on some of those review and maintenance kind of activities. It is up to the teachers to mark the appropriate activities for parents to complete at home by highlighting and printing off those PDF versions. And then teacher materials include all of the print files of the Equals Kit materials, PDF versions of the current and the past lessons, as well as problem-solving worksheets and resources for supporting students. Regular communication between home and school must occur for optimal success. Teachers have access to the Action Dictionary to help parents create or use adaptations, so students can be as independent and active math learners as possible. So again, I really want to stress we're providing as much as we possibly can to really cover all situations. Ultimately, it will be up to the teacher and the district to get that last bit of it, those specifics for each particular student and so on. So parents and teachers should discuss appropriate hands-on materials that could be found in the home. Teachers are given that list of options to provide suggestions to parents. So you can choose to use that home materials options list. You can send it home, or you can just discuss over the phone with the parents what would be the most appropriate for each student. Again, you know, something like cereal might be very appropriate for one student and it might be very inappropriate for another student. So we really tried to give a lot of leeway here as to what could be an appropriate manipulative. All right, in this section, we'll be covering these supports in the equals lessons. So this is going to be a better look at how all of these can be incorporated into an equals lesson. So if you're wondering how those extension lessons fit in, or how some of these pieces can work in a distance format, or just in general, how does equals work in a distance format? Hopefully this will give you some good insight into ways that you can support students in that distance format. So as we look at an equals lesson, we can begin to see how these supports can be used to support instruction in that distance format. The equals quick access and extension lessons can be combined to provide new instruction, review activities by the teacher, and additional activities parents can complete with their child at home. As a reminder, review and maintenance materials are intended for just that, and these should only be used if the student has limited or no internet access, as the new concepts are not being introduced. For our example lesson today, we're going to be looking at lesson 2B2, so that's chapter B, chapter 2, section B, lesson 2, with the objective construct sets of 5. So students are constructing sets of 5 within this particular lesson. Before we jump into that lesson, I do want to take a few minutes just to go over the materials provided in that extension materials. I know we've kind of done this already. I just want to lay it out there in a nice black and white kind of way so you can see everything that's there. So in the extension lessons, you'll find those extension lessons themselves. There's an intro. There's also the Equals Technology Lesson Center examples. So you'll see some images of what those activities could look like, as well as those PowerPoint slideshow templates and those parent materials lists. We can start with the Equals Extension e-learning intro document. So this is a general introduction to the e-learning materials with information regarding when to implement an extension lesson, information about the home task, materials needed to implement the extension lessons, and directions for the Equals Technology Lesson Center that are specific to that extension lesson. You'll also find a link to the pre-recorded training for the Equals Technology Lesson Center. The Equals Technology Lesson Center does play a key role in distance learning. So if you're not familiar with the Equals Tech Center, you will want to spend some time getting comfortable with that tool. That may be as simple as just going out to the Equals Tech Center and just playing around and seeing what's there. If you're familiar with Equals and the different print materials, it should be pretty comfortable for you. If you're brand new to it, there is a pre-recorded training available, and it's devoted solely to the ins and outs of the Equals Tech Center. And that is available on our Equals training channel on YouTube. In addition to this pre-recorded training, there is a PDF titled ETLC Instructions in your members only content. And this is a step-by-step guide to the Equals Tech Center as well. So if you don't want to watch a video, you'd rather read a PDF that'll walk you through that, you can do that as well. And of course, using either of those resources, you'll be quickly introduced to all of the various supports and materials provided by the Equals Tech Center. I've mentioned those slideshow templates had been created. Again, this is just another tool teachers can use. So sometimes it's easier to show some of the concepts with some of the tools that are available in PowerPoint than on the Equals Tech Center. Like I said, some of those images with the balance scale are going to be a lot more effective in that PowerPoint format. Know that these can also be opened in Google Slides or Apple Keynote as well. So again, just another resource you have to pull from. As a reminder, those extension lessons that I've mentioned, they do cover multiple lessons sometimes. So some extension lessons may be for one concept or one lesson, and others may cover multiple lessons. Extension lesson materials can support you even if you choose not to use the extension lesson itself. You can begin with that parent material list. In this example, I'll look at that parent materials list for chapter 2. And these lists were introduced, or they were intended to provide parents with a list of common household items that could be used during lessons to provide a concrete representation. So again, even if you're not using these extension lessons, go ahead and check that list out for some of those materials that parents can use at home to support their students in a hands-on concrete way. Because even though we're working in a distance format, it is still really important that students have their hands on those materials. So now that we've gone through all of those supports, let's look at how they actually fall in place in the context of a lesson. So as I mentioned, we're going to be looking at Chapter 2, Section B, Lesson 2. During a typical lesson component training for equals, we would go step by step through the lesson. And of course, while you're teaching in a distance format, the philosophy of the curriculum will remain the same. We're still going to go through the same activities. We're still going to support students as best we can. Of course, what that looks like is going to vary from student to student. Page 1 in the equals curriculum is always all about building and activating background knowledge, and we always start with that vocabulary review activity. In equals, you'll know that concrete connections are that review activity. We make a hands-on representation of the vocabulary word that we're reviewing. In the example that you see on the screen here, we're working on the words join and separate. And I apologize, I just realized that I didn't have my chat window open. Are there slideshows found in the Tech Center? No, the slideshows are available. Contact curriculum at ablenetinc.com and you can get access to those slideshows. That way we can send you all of those pieces. Extension lessons, I believe, are currently available through Chapter 5. They are still in development. It may be farther than that right now, so don't quote me, but I know that at least through Chapter 5, you should be set to go if that's where you're at in the curriculum. All right, so jumping back in. So as you can see in the video, we have Jen here demonstrating what it means to create that concrete connection. Again, concrete connections are those hands-on representations of the vocabulary word. We still want to demonstrate this to students. We still want to make sure that students can see this concrete connection being made. Now, the video doesn't have to be that top-down video format like we're seeing here. It can be whatever works for your setup at home or wherever you might be working in that distance format. If possible, we really encourage parents to create these with their students as well, so their students can actually have their hands on that concrete connection. Of course, that's not going to be the possibility for everyone, but of course, we all do the best we can, right? So moving on from that concrete connection that you've demonstrated via webcam, and hopefully students have worked on at home, again, you do have that materials list that you can provide to parents so they can create their own. We can move up to the warm-up game. Now, the games within distance learning may be somewhat difficult to work, to play in that distance format. So you're going to have to make that kind of judgment call. But know that there are some ways that you can still support some of the games. So things like the alternate spinner, regardless of whether teachers have it at their home or not, isn't going to be accessible to all the students in the group. You do have some other alternatives. You could try searching for the word spinner on Google, and then you could use the game board on the Equals Technology Lesson Center. That spinner on Google, the default one that you see on the screen there is Google's spinner. If you look at some of the links, there are some that are available to be customized as well. So if you're playing a game that isn't a rolling the dice kind of game and you need something else on that spinner, there are websites that will allow you to customize that to support students. Before we continue the next lesson component, I do want to take a minute to remind everyone about the action cards in the Equals curriculum. The action cards, I think, are one thing that are an extremely important tool within the curriculum. And I think some people kind of maybe misunderstand their use or how they're best suited to support students in the curriculum. So I always like to talk about action cards. These are meant to provide an action that students can think about choosing when they're talking about how to solve a problem. So when we solve problems in Equals, step 2 is what action can we take to solve that problem. These action cards that are present in every level will give students 3 options or 3 choices to choose from when they're thinking about what action they could take to solve a problem. Considering all the actions that could be used to solve a problem, it would be really difficult to ask a student what action they would want to take and then not provide them any choices, because there's just so many choices they could otherwise make. Narrowing it down to 3 really helps out. So we still want to make sure that we're demonstrating any of these actions whenever they come up. And again, you can see there, join, identify, and separate are our action words for this particular lesson. So we can demonstrate what it means to join a set, we can demonstrate what it means to separate the set, and then after we've joined or separated sets, we can identify the amounts in the whole set or the 2 small sets. So again, we still want to demonstrate these action cards whenever possible, or these action words whenever possible. Action words appear next to the lesson component in parentheses. So this is right in that lesson. You'll see all those action words can also be found in the action dictionary as well. So again, if students need support with some of those action words, know that you can look to that action dictionary to support some of those actions. Now remember, with distance learning, it is especially important to make thoughtful substitutions when necessary. The math dash from 2B2 is a perfect example. This activity uses subitizing cards and a stacked number line. Without equals materials, we have access to neither of those. On the Equals Technology Lesson Center, we do have some tools that we can use in place of those. So again, we're making that thoughtful substitution about what can I use instead. We also need to consider the essence of the lesson component. Math Dash is the first time students get to work with this new objective directly. It provides them a glimpse of things to come, while also introducing them to math tools, problem-solving strategies, or building background knowledge. In this particular lesson, students are given subitizing cards and connecting cubes. They're expected to make sets to match the subitizing card they've been given. If the student has a parent sitting with them, they could be making sets at home with materials from the home list, or you could be making sets on screen for them to choose from. So you really, at this point, making use of that highlight feature, that spotlight tool in the Equals Technology Lesson Center to kind of show students what their options are to choose from. So again, when we're thinking about subitizing, which one shows us the answer? You could also, as an alternative, change the colors of the sets. So now if you're looking for a student to give you an answer about which set is correct, oops, sorry about that, I went the wrong way. The student could now respond with the green set or the red set, assuming they know their colors. It's just another way that students can, you can help promote some of the communication in that distance format. So the second half of the first page is Explore and Connect, and the first activity in Explore and Connect is Poster and Cards. The Poster and Cards activity is meant to promote discussion about the theme and lesson-related concepts, and this is one activity that can really be enhanced through distance learning. The theme posters and equals are intended to provide context for the objective, and in this particular lesson, we're working with the ocean poster. In addition to the ocean poster, you could add fish or other ocean life to that workspace. So now you can talk about what kind of creatures you would find that live in the ocean. The lesson could also be further expanded by providing ocean sounds, especially helpful for students that maybe have low vision or who are blind. Now we can actually add some of those sounds in so they can get some kind of soundscape in their mind, or other videos from the internet. Bringing this real life space to the student will give them a connection to the problems that they will be later solving within the lesson. So we really want to make sure that they understand that this math concept that we're working on in the classroom can be found in the real world. And you'll see that in this example. And then we go into those examples of that particular location. In this example, it's that ocean poster. Math tools would be the next activity. And in math tools, we're introducing students to a tool or tools that they'll be using to solve problems within the lesson. These tools could be physical math tools, student tools, or work mats. The student tools and work mats from the curriculum are available in the Equals Technology Lesson Center. And in this particular lesson, the math tool is work mat 13. But what if the tool for a physical tool? But what if the tool is a physical tool, such as fraction stacks or MathLine? For physical tools, you may need to find a temporary alternative solution for those tools. So again, back to that idea of a thoughtful substitution. What can we use in place of it? Show and tell is the last activity on that first page. And in show and tell, you're taking math notes with students. Once again, that Equals Technology Lesson Center will be our main support. And the number notes poster is available at 3 levels in the Equals Technology Lesson Center. You'll want to be sure to use a format that will be most meaningful for students. So for example, if students do not read, I would recommend using less text and use more images to complete those number notes. Okay, I have a question here. How do we know if our district has an active license? If you have ever purchased the Equals curriculum, there is no subscription fee or license or anything like that. So if you have the physical Equals kit in your program, you would have access to all of these materials. Now, with that said, the previous version of Equals, the Equals 2.0 or 2009-2011, you can find that by looking at the copyright page. That particular page will give you an idea of which version you have. With that version, we do not have the same supports in place. We do still have supports. If you're looking for supports, please contact us. We can work with you on that. Also, is there an online version for the Switch? I'm not sure I understand your question. I apologize. For the Switch. Oh, for the step-by-step. Is there an online version for the step-by-step? I'm assuming is the question. There is not an online version. Gosh, that is such a good question. I'm going to have to write that down. You could look at something like the Sounding Board app that's available for the iPad, iPod, iPhone. It is going to depend on what your students' needs are, though. It may or may not be the most appropriate thing for them. But that is a fantastic question. I apologize, I don't have an answer off the top of my head. And are we still able to borrow kits to see if the program is appropriate for our students? So we do still have a loan program, kind of. So typically in the past, you used to get either a portion of the loan program, but because of everything going on with the COVID-19 virus, we are not sending out those physical kits. You can still contact either customer service or your local rep, curriculum, anyone at AbleNet. Let them know that you're interested in a sample of that, and we can set up a walkthrough webinar. Similar to what we're doing now, we'll go through the entire kit, kind of give you an idea of what's entitled with that kit, what kind of kids it's intended to be used with, and what kind of supports are available. So we don't ship out any physical pieces at the moment, but you still can get that webinar. You still can get some of those materials that we'll send you via email, so you can actually see what everything looks like. And do you have an example of what a full lesson would look like live in action for e-learning? For instance, what would it look like if you were a teacher teaching through a live Zoom? Is there a place we can see it modeled? We don't have a model at the moment. So this is going to be the closest that you're going to get to what a model would look like during this training. So again, using that Equals Technology Lesson Center to just demonstrate some of these concepts is the best we have at the moment. But that is certainly something to consider, a video just showing how all these pieces could be used in one particular lesson. The last thing I want to add on to that, though, is that there is, it is difficult to show an entire lesson in Equals. As we say during training, lesson pacing should be anywhere from 4 to 12 days per 4-page lesson. So when we think about that, even if we're only doing 20 minutes of direct instruction a day, that's minimum 80 minutes for an entire lesson, up to whatever 12 times 20 would be, 240. So up to 240 minutes. So we do not have full lesson demonstrations. We do have some videos on YouTube that can show you classroom videos. We don't have anything for e-learning just yet. Definitely something to consider. I will make a note of that though. All right, thank you for all your questions. We are on to page 2. So again, we're using Zoom to support a lot of this. We really want to make sure that students have those manipulatives if at all possible. And then you're going to use some of the supports that we've provided to really bring home those concepts that you're working on with your students. Does the online system have the option to provide support in other languages such as Spanish so parents are able to understand? I know there are some programs out there. I believe PowerPoint will do text to speech, no, speech to text as far as like captioning. I don't know if you can change the language. That would be incredible. But there's nothing as far as on the Equals Tech Center that's going to support other languages at the moment. All right, so the first activity on page 2 is vocabulary, where once again, we're making that concrete connection. So whatever you did in the beginning of your lesson is what we would expect you to do here. If you made the concrete connection on your webcam with the students and just kind of discussed what that word was all about, that's what you can do. If parents are making these at home with their students, you could do that as well. Again, this activity, the vocabulary activity, as well as that vocabulary review, are the same activity essentially. It's just that vocabulary word that's going to change. My district does not allow the use of Zoom. Is it possible to use Google Meet or other video options? Absolutely, yes. Yeah, I only use Zoom just because that's what we're on now. There are many, many, many platforms out there. I'm sure each has its own strengths and weaknesses. So I'm sure there are things that you could or couldn't do on your platform depending on what you're using. But you could certainly use any of those other platforms. In fact, Google is very popular. We have a lot of teachers that use Google, not just for like Google Hangouts and their meetings, but for things like the Google Drive and sharing documents and things like that as well. All right, so getting into the second part of this second page, we have the solve poster. And we can use the Equals Technology Lesson Center to do that. So we can look at that problem. We see that problem here on the board. Mrs. Lewis took her family to the beach. There were 5 family members. She needed to make sure that each person got a sandwich for lunch. How did Mrs. Lewis make the right amount of sandwiches? So during a typical training, we talk about the importance of problem solving and some of the support you can provide to students. One of the best supports you can provide to students with regards to problem solving in this context would be to really pare down the problem to its essence. And this is going to be more important, I think, for most students in that distance format. So here's an example of how we can work on that word problem in the Equals Technology Lesson Center using some of the images and the text box tools that we have available to really get through and to really work through that problem with students. And so I've pared down that long problem. Again, I'm just going to back up here. It's a real long problem. I've pared down that language. We've kept the idea or the essence of that problem the same. So the new problem would be Mrs. Lewis needs to make 5 sandwiches for her family members. How did Mrs. Lewis make the right amount of sandwiches? And what's great about this is now the students can see, because of those pick symbols, some of the facts that are in the problem. So when we start talking about facts, they might say sandwiches. I see sandwiches. Even if they can't read, they can see that image of the sandwich and say that they know that's a fact from the problem. Mrs. Lewis is a fact from the problem. So again, providing those extra supports is really helpful for students, even if you were working face-to-face with them. So just some things to consider when we do eventually get back into the classroom. So keeping in mind all the resources that you have available, don't forget about that action dictionary. The action dictionary, especially for students that need that additional support, you may find extremely helpful in these times. Parents may not be used to working with their students in the way that it would typically be, in the way students would typically work at school. Oftentimes school tasks and home tasks are very different. So the amount of support or the type of support might be different. So just keep that in mind, and keep in mind that you can share these action dictionary supports with parents as well. Within every lesson, we do present those 2 problems that we're solving, like I showed you that example on the Equals Tech Center. Teachers should demonstrate these problem solving strategies. So these problem solving strategies are available in every lesson. So we do recommend using that webcam to demonstrate those problem solving strategies for the students so they can see how those work. And additionally, hopefully, the parents will be able to work through that with the students as well. So the students really understand those problem solving opportunities. You could also check the AbleNet Equals Math community Facebook page to see if there's already a problem solving strategy demo available for that particular lesson. So if you're already part of that Facebook community, you'll know that we post videos once a week. Right now, we're doing lesson strategy videos. We've probably done about 100 of these. So quite a few of the lessons, about a quarter of the lessons in the curriculum do have a video to support these problem solving strategies currently. So if you're looking for some supports that maybe you don't have to put the time in, you can just easily pull up those videos from Facebook and use those to demonstrate the lesson or the problem solving strategies as well. So again, think about all the possible resources you have available. Moving on to that third page, and this is really going to be I think that the biggest challenge for most teachers is how do we make that concrete, semi-concrete, and abstract representational sequence accessible in a distance format, because that first part is that concrete. So we really need the students to be able to work with those hands-on materials. So the best that we can do here is we can demo what that concrete representation looks like to the students via webcam. And then ideally, parents would practice with this at home. They may be using materials that you've printed out. They may even be using homemade work mats. So work mat 13 here as an example. Sorry about that. Could be made as a homemade version, just using construction paper, something that I think quite a few homes would probably have, something like that. And then you could draw out that work mat for the student to use at home. So it's still, like I said, looks generally similar to what the students are used to using, but it's not the actual version, but it's a nice substitute. For semi-concrete, the Equals Technology Lesson Center is a perfect example of this. We can use the materials there. In this particular activity, we can use the number set cards that are shown with a sticky note separating a whole amount into parts. So that is the standard part of the lesson. On the Equals Technology Lesson Center, we can use the dice patterns to effectively complete the same activity. And in an abstract, WorkMat 13 again could be used, but this time with those abstract numerals. So really the biggest challenge in the CSA portion of the lesson is that concrete representation. We want to make sure we demonstrate that concrete representation, and parents are working with their child at home to really understand that. Worksheets could be completed through a program that will allow annotations. I know if you were to put something in, if you were to upload these to Google Drive and then the parents were to open them at home on an iPad, for sure, they could use annotations to complete those worksheets with the student, save it, and then send it back. Alternatively, some teachers have chosen to just use these as a group discussion. So let's look at item 1, let's talk about it, let's determine an answer as a group. So again, just like as you probably already know, these distance learning lessons will be slightly different from what you would do in the classroom. In problem solving after CSA, that's going to be very similar to what we saw with that solve poster and some of those demonstrations. Again, if you can rewrite that word problem for students, break it down to its essence, take out some of that excess language, you're really going to provide a lot of supports for students there. And then you've also got the close of the lesson. And what's nice here is we start out with that math dash revisited. So this is the math dash activity that you did on page 1. Whatever you did, whatever was successful in the beginning of the lesson, go ahead and repeat that, because now students are going to see how much they've learned and how far they've come just inside this lesson. We then have questions. What did we learn? We talk about the student number notes and the I learned work mats. As I mentioned, page 4 is all about practice and application, and this is that great page that you can send home to parents with highlighted examples of what they could be doing with their student at home. This page is a page of choices for the students to work on. So once we've taught that lesson, we can now look at the extension lesson. And you'll notice that this extension lesson would be taught after 2B1 and 2B2, and we have in this example, just completed 2B2, so we can go ahead and teach this example lesson, or I'm sorry, this extension lesson. So the directions for this lesson are right at the top, and then you have that materials box below. And I do want to point out that the search images over here for the Equals Tech Center, it does specifically say search in parentheses. So what that means is when you type that into the Equals Technology Lesson Center, use the way that it's typed out here. We've found what search terms will bring up exactly the materials you need, so go ahead and just use those terms as is. Vocabulary words, if needed, can be found in the vocabulary cards materials list. In Equals Tech, we have listed all of the images, as I mentioned, with those search terms, so keep that in mind. Below that, you also have that home task that students can complete with their parent at home. These are made thoughtfully keeping in mind what limited resources parents may have at home for their students. So here's another extension activity in action. So this is on the Equals Technology Lesson Center. We have that set up with everything for this activity, and we can talk about the amount of cubes. Again, we're counting and constructing sets of 5. We've got cubes on the screen there. We can count 5 fingers. We can place a cube on each finger to show that there are 5. We could then also move that to a 5 frame to continue to reinforce that idea of 5. We can count the cubes with students. There's really a lot we can do with some very basic images, as you can see here. So this is an exact demonstration of what this extension activity would look like. I would expect that you could then take this activity and redo this with those other amounts. As you see at the bottom there, it says repeat with amounts 1 through 4. So again, it's giving you some ideas of how you can use the Equals Tech Center with the idea that you'd be teaching this in a distance format in mind. So just some things to keep in mind as we wrap up the webinar. Pacing will be different from the traditional school year. It's very likely you will not get through a lesson in the same amount of time. I'm really gonna say that most likely you're gonna spend a lot more time on each lesson, just because of the nature of distance learning. Always make those thoughtful substitutions, and this is a great strategy when using equals and a necessary strategy when teaching equals or teaching, I would venture to say teaching anything in that distance format. We simply cannot expect teachers or parents to have those needed materials from the lesson. It really is important that you consider other materials that could be used in place. And as I've mentioned, always feel free to contact us should you have any questions. You see that curriculum at ablenetinc.com at the bottom there. You can reach out right to the curriculum department. The curriculum department is made up of educators. So we have been in the classroom. We understand maybe not this exact situation, but we understand many of the common issues that teachers face. So just be assured that we will work with you to meet the needs of your students when necessary. Available resources, as I mentioned, will largely determine the delivery and support necessary. And again, we will work with you in any way that we possibly can to provide the support needed. We do have about 2 minutes left if there are any other questions. I know I've answered some, but if you've been holding off to ask a question until the end of the webinar, now would be that time. Okay, doesn't look like any questions are coming through. So for those of you that are still with me, thank you for your time today. We always appreciate you coming to these AbleNet webinars. And as I've mentioned a few times now, please feel free to reach out to us, whether it be the curriculum department, customer service, any one of us. We were all here to help. Oh, for those of you saying thank you, you're welcome. Do you have any free support for ESY programming? If you do have equals, we do have gosh, I just lost it. The review and maintenance packets that you could use. Because ESY is generally anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks, very short time frame. We don't have like a set program for it, but those review and maintenance packets that we do have available for distance learning could be very helpful for ESY. So definitely reach out to us in the curriculum department. All right, no more questions. Well, again, thank you for your time today. And I hope to see you on other AbleNet University webinars. Oh, are there activities included with our program, or does our district have to purchase the distance learning packet? No. So the distance learning packets are all included with your purchase. So if you have purchased equals, if your district has equals, go ahead and reach out to us. You already have access to them. You will need to let us know which version of equals you have, however, so we can get you the appropriate ones. If you request the wrong version, they won't line up with the lessons that you're expecting. All right, I do believe we are out of questions. All right, have a good day, everyone. Bye now.